We're doing a series of lessons which we're calling Moses Setting the Captives Free. We're studying the book of Exodus and seeing how that God used the life of Moses to liberate the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. This particular lesson I'm calling Bowing Before a Burning Bush. Bowing before a burning bush. And we're going to talk about the personal call of God upon Moses' life. How that God called him for this particular mission. In Exodus, the 3rd chapter and verse 2, we read, "There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up." Now, this day was like any other ordinary morning. It begins, it's hot in the desert, it's a dry place to be. But before this day is over, Moses' life will have completely changed forever. Because the call of God is going to come to him. And in the call of God coming to his life, he will never be able to go back to just feeding his father-in-law's sheep again. No, his life has radically changed. Let me give you some points to help you remember the things I want to share with you. The first thing I want to talk about is what I'm going to call the attraction. The attraction. God knows how to get our attention. And that's what God is doing for Moses. In Exodus, the 3rd chapter and verse 3, we read, "So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up." This was something unusual. Moses has been in the desert now for many years. It's been 40 years since he left Egypt, and he's been out with his father-in-law's sheep for a long time and has seen a lot of desert bushes, many of them. But here's something unusual. He sees a bush that's on fire, but it refuses to turn to ashes. It just keeps burning and burning and burning. It refuses to burn up. Now, in the desert, of course, it's a hot place. It's a very dry place. And so when a bush is set on fire, it burns up very quickly. But not in this case. Now, what that is saying to you and I spiritually is saying we don't have to lose the fire of God in our spirits. No, we don't have to burn out. Not at all. Because the fire keeps rekindling itself. It burns from within itself. So the bush burned, but the bush did not burn up. Now, at this point, Moses doesn't understand that the fire in the bush was actually the angel of the Lord. In fact, Jesus referenced this later in the New Testament when Jesus said, "I'm the one that was there talking to Moses at the burning bush." He doesn't know that this is God that is there, but God has got his attention. And now that God has his attention, Moses turns aside to see this miraculous sight. And that's when God began talking to him. Now, I caution you here because I think there are times that we miss something that God wants to do within our lives because we're just in too big a hurry to get through the day, to get it over, to do something else that we think is important. And we don't stop and turn aside to see what's going on. So God begins to talk to him out of the burning bush. Now, the second thing that I want to address is what I'm going to call the announcement. The announcement. God begins to call his name. That's right. God knows us as individuals. He knows us personally. And so he begins to call, "Moses, take your sandals off because you're standing on holy ground." Moses is astonished. He's amazed to hear a voice speaking from the bush that's calling his name. And as I just said in Exodus 3 and 5, God says, take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Now, what makes anything holy? It takes the presence of God. Only God can make things holy. And so God is speaking to him from the burning bush and saying, I am here. Take your sandals off your feet. Now that tells us something. This command of God to remove his sandals, it tells us several things. Point A, I would say, it's a sign of submission to a greater authority. In other words, you don't own this land, Moses. I'm the owner of this land. We've got to understand that God owns it all. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the people and they that dwell in it. This belongs to God. And so it's a sign of his ownership, submitting to God's authority. God owns the ground where Moses is standing. Take your shoes, your sandals off your feet. But there's another thing. Point B, I would say, there must be nothing between Moses and God. Nothing. I believe the same is true within our lives. Within our life, we must not allow anything to separate us from God. Nothing between us and God. Even to the point, God illustrated this life in the life of Moses with a veil, not even a thin piece of cloth. So it said when he would come out, the glory of God would be on his face. He would put a veil over it so he wouldn't frighten the people. But when he went into God's presence, he removed the veil. There must be nothing between us and God. Point C, I see. Today was the beginning of a new life for Moses. This is not just another ordinary day, Moses. This is a new beginning in your life. Something brand new. Now, I'm sure in the past, Moses has stepped in some garbage before. Some garbage, things that don't smell good, things that he's picked up from the past. He must leave that all behind him. That ought to be encouraging to you and I, to realize this is a new day. This is a new beginning. We must leave the past behind. And it's when we release our past that we can reach into our future. God has something new planned for us. And then the fourth thing I see, point D, is this new walk that God is calling us to do is to be a walk of faith, a walk of trusting God. See, the reason sandals are designed in the first place, sandals are designed to protect his feet from the dangers of the desert. There are many things in the desert that would harm his feet. Scorpions that would sting him, thorns that would pierce his flesh, rocks that would burn his feet. And so the sandals are designed to protect us from anything that would harm us. Now you're going to have to learn to depend on God. You're going to have to learn to trust God. Oh, what a powerful message for you and I. What God is teaching Moses is you must learn to put your total trust in God. The same is true for you and I. Many times we begin to try to take the role of being the protectorate. We're going to protect ourselves. No. This is called a walk of faith. A walk of faith. So remove your sandals or anything that separates you from God and stand barefoot in his presence. Stand before him in submission, saying, I am ready to do your will, whatever it is that you want me to accomplish. Thank God Moses obeys. But when Moses obeys and removes his sandals from his feet, God speaks to him again. And this time, what God says to Moses terrifies him. It brings fear into his soul, anxiety. In Exodus 3 and 10, we read, God says, So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Oh, those are some of the last words that Moses wanted to hear. Moses is not ready to return to Egypt. Not now, not ever. He's not going back because he left there in disgrace. He left there a failure. He left there rejected by his own people. They betrayed him. Moses doesn't want to hear God say anything about returning back to Egypt again. Well, this is so true in our lives. Many times God is preparing us for whatever special thing he wants to accomplish in our lives, and yet it seems so foolish, so contrary to reason, because this is to be a walk of faith. A walk of faith. You're going to have to learn to depend upon me, Moses, not depend upon yourself. But because Moses doesn't want to hear what God is saying, he begins dealing with what I will call the apologies. That's my third point. The apologies. In other words, Moses begins to make excuse after excuse why he cannot do what God is calling him to do. Now, first of all, that is a very foolish position to take. God is never going to call us to do anything that he's not going to help us to do it. But we, like Moses, began making excuses. Let me tell you up front, no excuses are accepted. Moses begins to make excuses. Excuse number one was, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Wow, what a change has happened in Moses' life. These 40 years in the desert has been a humbling experience for him. This is not the same man that came into the desert. No, there's been a big change in his life. Moses has gone from saying, look who I am, to asking, who am I? Someone has well said, Moses' life can be divided into three main parts. The first 40 years, he was learning, look at me, who I am. See, I am somebody. The second 40 years in his life, he has a very humbling experience in the desert. So he goes from being a somebody to a nobody. And he's saying, I'm nobody. I can't do this. I can't do what you're asking of me. And then the last 40 years of his life, Moses discovers how that God can take a nobody to do something. That's a good way of illustrating it. God takes this broken man, this man that spent 40 years in the desert, to become the deliverer of Egypt. And so he's asking, who am I? Now, to understand this, you need to go to Acts, the 7th chapter, and verse 22. And there's a powerful verse there that says, Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was powerful in speech and action. In other words, he was a general. He was a leader. He had the best education that this superpower could offer him. But now, 40 years in the desert has reduced him to being a nobody. And he said, who am I to do this? See, what he's done, Moses has cast away his confidence. He's lost his confidence. He's no longer trusting in himself, thinking, I can do this. That was his failure with murdering the Egyptian slave master. He thought, I can take care of this. I'll handle this situation. He discovered very quickly the task was much bigger than him. So he's lost his confidence. He's no longer trusting in himself. God responds to Moses and he says, I will be with you. Boy, what powerful words those are. I will be with you. And I want you to understand, God is saying the same thing to you and I. He is speaking the same words because God is no respecter of persons. What he did for Moses, he will do for us. Whatever it is that God is calling you to do, God will enable you to do it. I will be with you. Put your confidence in me. I'm going to help you to fulfill this call of God, Moses. And it is here where God reveals himself to Moses with a new name. He has revealed himself to Abraham. He had revealed himself to different people in ages past. He spoke of himself as El Shaddai. He's talked about himself being the creator God, Elohim. He is the most high God, Elyon. But now God says, I'm going to reveal myself to you in a new name that no one has ever heard before. I am that I am. Now, what is God saying when he says, I am the great I am? I am that I am. God is simply saying, I will be anything you need me to be. Anything that you need me to be, anytime that you need me, I will be there for you. Don't you understand? That's the same thing that God is saying to us. That God is there. I am that I am. I will be whatever you need me to be. You need a lawyer? I will be with you to give you wisdom. You need a doctor? I will become your great physician. Whatever it is that you need within your life, I am that I am. And I will be with you, Moses, to help you fulfill this call. This is not something I'm expecting you to do alone, to do by your own power. I am going to be with you, and I will be your ability. The second excuse that he makes is, suppose they will not believe me. Now, Moses has a right to say those words because, remember, 40 years ago, he attempted to deliver the Israelites, and that ended in a disaster, in just a catastrophe. Moses remembers his first attempt to deliver the Israelites ended up with their rejection. It was Israelites that betrayed him, and you can tell he's still sensitive about this. What's going to make this time any different than the first time, except I'm 40 years older? What's going to make the difference? He's basically telling God, I will not have their respect. And as I said, he's got a right to say these words because he has been down that road once before. And so God makes him a promise. God promises him, I'm going to be with you and I'm going to give you three signs that I'm with you. The first one was the sign of the rod and the serpent. The second one was the sign of the leprous hand. And then the third one was the sign of the water turning to blood when it's poured on dry land. We'll look at those three signs in the next lessons, and we'll see how that they relate to you and I. But these three signs, basically, God is saying, I'm going to give you what you need to have the respect of the people. These three signs that I'm giving you are going to convince Israel that God is with you, that I am the one that called you, I am the one that sent you. And when we read the story, we see that's exactly what they did. Now, what this says to you and I, because in applying it to our lives, what God calls us to do, what God speaks to us and says, this is what I want you to accomplish with your life. These three signs tell us that God is not only with us, but that God will manifest himself in our lives at strategic times, which is not only an encouragement to us as the leader, it is also an encouragement to the people that are following us. The people that are following us are going to be reassured that God did call us, that God is with us. And the signs are the testimony, the evidence that we are not alone. This is not just our idea. This is something that God has commanded. So in Moses' life, God promises him his miraculous power to help deliver Israel. I believe the same is true today, that God manifests himself. Now, we don't follow miracles, no. We follow the God of miracles, the God that gives us just enough miracles to prove he's there and he is with us. Because God doesn't want us following miracles, and the people that think, you know, a miracle a day will keep the devil away, that's false theology, friend. That's bad thinking. That's not the purpose of the miracles. The purpose of the miracles are to reassure us that we are doing what God called us to do, that we're in step with God, we are following God, that God is with us. And that should be reassuring to every one of us as spiritual leaders. Now, here's the third excuse that Moses makes. He says, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent." Boy, what a change has happened in this man, that the Bible said he was powerful in words. But Moses realizes, first of all, he's lost the favor of Pharaoh's court. Any advantage that he ever had in Pharaoh's court is long gone. Never again will he be able to stand there and smile in Pharaoh's court and people smile with him. They may laugh at him, but they're not going to rejoice with him. He's lost the favor of Pharaoh's court. 40 years have gone by. And in those 40 years that have taken place, he's lost the ability to speak fluently. I'm sure that he knew the Egyptian language very well. He spoke it very fluently, but that was 40 years ago. And for 40 years, he's been on the backside of the desert with these ba-ba sheep. That's all he's been listening to, is the sheep that are bleating out their calls all day. And he's saying, I can't even talk plain anymore. I'm stammering and stuttering. I can't speak the Egyptian language. I can't do it. And God responds to Moses with a question of his own. He says, "Who is it that made man's mouth?" In other words, I'm the one that made your mouth. I can make it work. Boy, those are powerful words. In other words, God is our ability. We're not trusting in our own strength, in our own self. No, we're trusting in the God that made us. And God says, I'm going to be with you and help you fulfill the call of God. Now, here's the fourth excuse that he makes. The fourth excuse was, please send by the hand of whoever else. Now what is Moses saying? Moses is saying to God, you got the wrong man. You've called the wrong person. And he's saying to God, you need to call somebody else. You've chosen the wrong man. Choose somebody else. At this point, he's pushed God too far, and God becomes angry with him. And he tells Moses, you are my choice. I have chosen you to do this thing, and you're going to do it. He's saying, you're full of excuses. You say you can't talk. All right, I'm going to give you a helper, somebody that will go with you. I'm going to give you Aaron, your brother to be your helper. And you're going to stand before God and represent me. Aaron will stand before you to represent you. And then it's very humorous what God says here. God says, I know that he can speak well. In other words, Aaron's a big talker. Aaron knows how to talk. It's God's humor. It's sarcastic, but it's sarcastic humor. I know that he can talk very well. Don't give me that excuse anymore. Now, I wonder sometimes, I wonder if Moses ever regretted his excuses. Because he's going to discover in his helper, Aaron, a man that was very up and down, back and forth. He was not stable. He was not a strong leader. He would follow the people rather than the people following him. I wonder if Moses ever regretted that. We don't know. The Bible doesn't address that at all. But we do know Aaron comes to meet him in the desert, and they go and stand before Pharaoh. Now, after this burning bush experience, we find Moses returning back to Jethro, his father-in-law. I find it interesting. He doesn't say one word about his burning bush experience. Not one word. He doesn't mention it. All that he does, he very respectfully asks Jethro for permission to go back to Egypt to deliver his people. That's all he says. I want to go back and visit my people in Egypt. But he says nothing about the burning bush experience. It's what I see in this. There are some life-changing experiences that we cannot explain. And the more we try to explain it, the more mystical it becomes, the less that people understand what we're talking about. Moses didn't make that mistake. He doesn't try to explain it to Jethro. He just simply asks permission. Sir, I want to go back and visit my people. Would you give me your blessing to go back again? Someone has well said, the Exodus began when Moses began to follow God. Those are good words. Those are good words, and I believe they are true. They are true in our life. God's mission for our life, whatever it is that God has destined us to do, to accomplish with our life, when we begin to follow God, when we stop making excuses and say, yes, sir, here I am, send me, then God can help us fulfill his call in our life. So I pray with the call of God upon your life that you follow the God who does wonderful things.